Hello there. I'm Linda Bloom. I got my main squeeze over here.
Hello.
And we're speaking to you today about how to raise the heat in your partnership. And we have lots of experience in keeping the heat, the sexual vibration, and that chemistry alive and well, because we've been together for more than 50 years now. And we're both of the mindset that keeping the sexual dimension of the relationship in really frisky condition is enlivening to your partnership. So it's very easy to get distracted by other things. When you have children, particularly when they're young, you can get into letting the relationship become about co-parenting. You can, when you're building your careers, the relationship can drift into being business partners and mutually supporting each other's career development, and that's wonderful. But if you allow your relationship to drift into co-parenting roommates and business partners, and the lover's dimension of the relationship doesn't get really nourished and fed, it becomes the failure to thrive baby in the family. So we're all about paying attention to what really works well for you in the sexual partnership, how to keep the emotional climate really juicy so that that's an easy slide over when you're feeling warm and loving. You want to pleasure and be pleasured by your partner. Keep that in really good shape. And I'm convinced that foreplay is everything that's gone on from the last time you had sex to this time. And so all of that counts. The whole context of the relationship counts to keep the warmth and the caring and the love flowing and the sexual vibe flowing. So we're going to tell you some things that we've learned from our experience with each other and with couples we've worked with in our classes and in our counseling practice over the years. And we really have some practical tips to offer you today.
Okay, my turn?
Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for tuning into this. And I want to express gratitude for being invited. Also, one of the things that really works for me in these talks, and we give quite a few of them on aspects of relationship that are important. And, you know, both Linda and I agree that having a healthy sexual relationship is a very vital part of it for almost all couples. So one of the things that I really enjoy doing when we do these talks is engaging with you and the audience. And so I really welcome any comments, questions, observations that you might want to give us during this, and we'll have a conversation with you. So the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the essential ingredients in having a fulfilling, healthy, vital sexual relationship is, well, two words. And these aren't necessarily, they're definitely not the only words, but they're the two that came to mind for me. And we'll be talking about them and some other things too afterwards, but I want to just mention what they are. And the first one that came up to me was responsibility, which is not a word that most of us often associate with great sex. However, that can be, it can be a problem if you don't accept responsibility for your experience in the experience of lovemaking. And we've really worked with a lot of people over the years who feel that is their partner's responsibility to not only provide the stimulus and the qualities of experience that they enjoy and that they want to have, but they it's not uncommon for people to make the assumption that you will not only, do the things that I really like, but you'll know what they are, and I shouldn't have to ask or express my desire for specific things. That sort of takes some of the fun out of it. I want you to know. And of course, when you've been together for a while, as we've been married for almost
47
years. Yeah. But we've been together for 51 years. So when you've been together, you do know a lot about, hopefully, you've learned a lot about your partner and their body and how they appreciate interacting physically. But even then, we're all different in every moment. We may have different desires, different feelings, different needs, different sensations come up. And so we want to really be responsible for engaging in a way that is an expression of our deep desire at the moment, that we're taking responsibility for that. Doesn't mean that it's all up to us. Sex is an interactive experience, of course. But it does mean that we hold ourselves as a responsible agent. And the second word that came up for me was listening. Listen to your partner. Listen to what they're telling you verbally and non-verbally. Listen to how they're responding to you. It may be non-verbal. You may just be getting sounds from them, or gestures, or physical movements, that if you really listen to what does that mean, you might get some clearer sense. And if you don't know exactly what it means, then be willing to ask. Mm-hmm. How does that feel? How are you doing right now? Does this, because some of us are reticent to make our specific desires known. And so it sometimes can be helpful to inquire about that. And also listen to your own body. Mm-hmm. Listen to what your body is telling you about how you're responding, about what feels good, about what you might desire more of, what you feel you've had enough of, or whatever. So listening and responsibility, two words that I think will take you pretty far in this process.
So in keeping with your inviting people to take responsibility and to practice committed listening, that always starts with ourselves. We listen in to our own body's sensations, what feels good and what doesn't feel so good. We listen in to our own mind. We listen into our fantasies. We are telling ourselves the truth first. Then after we've checked in with ourselves, we can check in with our partner, and we can reveal to them rather than conceal. Rather than expecting them to read our mind about what lights us up, we can present that to them. So I want to give you some ideas to consider about what you're tuning into in yourself, about different kinds of sex there are. I'm not doing them in order of importance or my favorites at the top. I'm just telling you that there are different kinds of sex. It's not just all, of one variety. There's different varieties, and to know what our favorite varieties are, and that changes, and to tell ourselves the truth, and then we can reveal it to our partner. So I'm going to start with junk food sex, and they're also known as quickies. And these are just a few minutes, and they have their place. I love junk food myself. I will eat some potato chips and Mars bars, but I wouldn't want to make a steady diet of it. But they have their place. And if it's true for you that you would just like to have some quick sex and then it's over with, that's great. Next is meat and potato sex. If you're vegetarian and that meat part of it is not appetizing to you, you can call it the tofu and sprouts, but it's the main fare. This is the sex that we know that we can count on. This is usually in the bed, the old tried and true. It's usually in the evening, and we know the positions and we know the moves. And this is wonderful. It's wonderful. It's the old reliable. But then there's gourmet dining. And you want to have this as among the options. And a lot of people don't gift themselves with the gift of time to take from soup to nuts, to have full body massage for him and full body massage for her, to have soul gazing, to look into each other's eyes, to brush each other's hair, take a bath together, to shower together, to brush her hair. These are context setting things, and you can have a lot of time to develop the energy, to move up to peaks and calm down, and move up to peaks, not go over the brink, and calm down, and to have a lengthy, thorough, comprehensive session in the lovemaking. Then there's hot chili peppers. The hot chili peppers is the stuff that's a bit edgy. This would be acting out some of your fantasies, maybe dressing up in costume, maybe role playing, maybe doing things that are just somewhat out of your comfort zone, but with a safe word. So if you wanted to do a little spanking or tying up or something of this nature, that with agreement you could experiment and do some of the things that you imagine other people are having more adventuresome sex, except that you're not. You're relying the old tried and true. Then last but not least is ambrosia. And ambrosia, of course, is the nectar of the gods and the goddesses. And this is tantric sex, where you bring the dimension of spirituality to the lovemaking. And this can be an exquisite and extraordinary way of being lovers with each other. And so there's a whole banquet of options to choose from. And not to be shy, to be experimental, because one of the main ways to keep the heat high in your relationship over the years together is to be experimental, to not get too caught in habituated patterns, to not go for the predictable comfort and security of the known, to be out there on the adventuresome edge. Use your creativity.
Now?
No, bro, no, right this minute, not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just inviting them and us to use our creativity too.
Well, because we are therapists and we work largely with couples, we hear a lot of concerns and questions and complaints from couples about a whole wide range of subjects, and sex is right up there, although it's not one that people often feel particularly comfortable or free to talk about. But once they do, what they find often is that it's very helpful just to express things that need to be clarified and need to be communicated, and need to be experienced too. Because when there are issues that we have that don't get acknowledged and don't get expressed and don't get addressed, what happens is that they don't disappear, as you may have noticed. They just go underground, and they can infiltrate and really corrupt the relationship, because they're what we refer to as incompletions. That is, things that need to be addressed and need to be dealt with, but they're not. And when they're not, it's sort of like you've got a contaminant in your relationship that is going to bring down the quality of experience, particularly related to that area. And what can complicate it is that because we tend to attract people who in many ways are different from us. They don't have the exact same inclinations or preferences or predispositions that we have in terms of a whole wide range of things. Like some people are savers and some are spenders. Some people like to be at the airport early. Some people like to cut it close. Some people, are very sexual. Others, it's not quite as important to them. So there's a lot of different areas where we are going to have differences. And if we don't have a willingness and an understanding of how to deal with these differences, it's going to affect in a negative way whatever experience they're related to. Mm-hmm. So since we're talking about sex today, let's talk about one of the primary places where differences show up in sexual relationships. It's not the only place, but it's one that we hear the most about. And that is in relationships in which one partner has a higher libido, a stronger sexual predisposition, a stronger desire for it, and the other one not so much. And this can be, if it isn't dealt with, and I want to assure everybody that even when there are differences like this, they can be worked out in ways that are satisfying to both partners. And that's very important. Number one, what's important is to trust that we can work this out, because some people just see this as something that this is how it is and it's never going to be any different. It's not going to be better and I just got to suck it up and live with it. That doesn't work. That is, if you haven't noticed, that attitude is not going to bring more juice and more passion, more trust and more love into your relationship. So we want to really look at how to deal with that when it comes up. And we could write a whole book about this mm-hmm. one thing, and we've only got a few minutes here, but we do want to just mention a few things that can be helpful. Would you like to go first and say something?
Lessons in patience for the high desire person, to be able to pleasure themselves sometimes, to take the edge off of it so that they're not grouchy and feel so deprived, and lessons in generosity for the lower desire person. When a person feels like they don't want to have sex or they don't feel like having sex right now, not to force yourself, not to shove yourself past the resistance, but see if you can play the edge of your comfort zone to be a little bit more generous, to be thinking thoughts of appreciation and gratitude that warm the heart towards your partner so that you want them to be happy. So this is an edge that people can play if they're committed to keeping the harmony and the well-being in good stead in their relationship. But I also want to say that although we hear about the high desire person and the lesser desire person, and we invite them to stay in dialogue with the spirit of goodwill, also there is one partner who sometimes wants to do the quickies and the other person doesn't like them. That's also a chance for generosity of spirit, to make room for some quickies sometimes. One person may want to do the edgy stuff and the other person's a little bit more reserved, conservative, and modest. That would be an opportunity for them to be generous of spirit. And some people think, Tantra, that's not on my menu. And to at least open your mind to all the varieties, because variety is the spice of life. And it's definitely variety within the same partnership, not going to other partners, because then you've got problems with energy being siphoned off to others. That it's not a moral thing about keeping the container sealed. It's just a practical thing, because it takes so much energy to make one relationship work. When there's energy flowing out to other people, it can be difficult to make the primary relationship be as lovely and as sturdy and wonderful as it can be. So to stay in negotiation, not to just put a lid on it and say, oh, I asked for that once before and he definitely wasn't interested. I'm not going to risk asking again. Sometimes we have to bring the same difficult subject up a number of times not to sell out ourselves and our desire system too easily.
So one of the things that we've noticed over the years is how daunting it can be to speak honestly, openly, and vulnerably about this topic that we're talking about today. And, it's funny because we live in a culture that is in some ways obsessed with sexuality. And yet, relative to other countries, there is a fairly high level of inhibition about honestly, openly discussing sex, particularly as it refers to our own experience. So if you have difficulty or feel uncomfortable or embarrassed about opening up this subject or talking about it truthfully and honestly from your own experience, believe me, you're not alone. I would say that the majority of people that we deal with who do have issues related to sex, and it's a fairly high percentage of the people that we have worked with, there's a certain level of discomfort that at least one of them has. And sometimes, in terms of discussing their personal experiences and preferences and things, and sometimes that discomfort is so strong that it inhibits them or prevents them from engaging at a very deep level with this conversation. They'll avoid it, or sometimes they'll just try to keep it more superficial, or they won't want to make it too personal. And I think some of that comes from messages, both spoken and unspoken, that we've gotten from our families or from our churches or from our communities, that this is something that is that has a certain amount of discomfort or shame even into it. There can be shame about not being sufficiently sexually oriented. There can be shame about being too sexual or too focused on it. So because it's such a vital part of most relationships, it's really important to take seriously the pleasure level of the experience and to realize that this, having a fulfilling love life includes sex, and that it's an essential part of a healthy relationship. Because, although many couples are very concerned about places where they have breakdowns in their communication and difficulties, they know that that's something that needs attention. But sometimes they think, well, it's sex. That's just kind of not directly significant in terms of it's sort of like the icing on the cake. It's not that essential. And we want to challenge that belief.
It is essential.
Yeah,
it is important. It is central to almost all couples. So you can have a wonderful relationship that is platonic, where you have a good friendship, you have a good business partnership, you have a good co-parenting. But if it's missing the lover's component, that is something that most people really want to have, and they have the belief that it should just come naturally, and it doesn't just come so naturally for everybody. Some people have to work at it harder than others and have these conversations that will shed light on how to have the most wonderful, fulfilling sexual experience. And I'm totally with Charlie about having the incompletions dealt with so that there isn't anything in the channel clogging up the free flowing of energy. Like the free flowing of conversation, lubricates the way for the free flowing of the sexual vitality of the relationship. One of the things we hear, and we hear this over and over and over and over from couples whose sexual relationship has gone into the kind of driven off the road, is that they don't have time and energy to devote to it. And so I challenge you to make it a priority in your life, no matter how many other commitments that you have, to take the time to discuss what needs to enliven your sexual relationship, brainstorm with each other about what would perk it up if it needs a perk, and take the time to actually manifest what you vision would be helpful. We're both fans of romantic getaways. We took honeymoons even while we were raising the children. You have a family vacation, and sometimes people like to have separate vacations as an individual, but to save a week, a weekend, some days of each year for a romantic getaway, just the two of you. In addition to the honeymoon, to have some romantic weekends where you go away. A change of setting can make a difference. When you're away from your normal routine, you can get into a more creative mode, a more relaxed mode. When we were raising kids and we'd go away on the romantic getaways, the first day of the weekend we would nap and try to catch up because we were so tired. And then on the second day, the lovemaking could be robust because we were rested finally, felt really connected with each other. I'm also a fan of designated time. Now, we had a workshop some years back where we were talking about date book sex, and somebody said, I'd rather have pins stuck in my eyes than have designated time. It only really lives for me if it's spontaneous. And I think spontaneous lovemaking is wonderful and beautiful, but sometimes your life can get so full that if you wait for the spontaneous lovemaking, it can be a long wait. So I say have the designated assigned times where you carve it out of stone sometimes from our busy life, and sprinkle in the spontaneous with the designated. And in this kind of a situation, more is better. I wanted to tell you about a research study that I read that was with 16,000 people being studied about happiness and sexuality. There was a very clear, significant indication that the happiest people are the people having the most sex. Now, maybe you'd say because they're so happy, they have more sex, but it could be that they're having more sex and that boosts their happiness up. They also inventoried these people about their income per year. And what the researchers found, this was a joint project from a researcher in the United States and Great Britain, that the people who moved their sexual frequency from once a month to 4 times a month, when they inventoried them after that, their boost in their happiness equated with $50,000 a year income each. So the boost that you get from making
each person or each couple?
Each person got a 50.
So like if somebody goes from once a week to 4 times a week.
I don't know about that. It was from once a month to 4 times a month.
Once a month to 4 times a month.
It was equivalent to having an extra income of $100,000. I thought that was pretty startling statistic, that the happiness really was very much related to the sexual pleasure in the body. I have the reference for it if you want to check it.
Yeah, I would like to see the reference.
Okay.
The second book that we wrote is called Secrets of Great Marriages. And we interviewed a lot of couples who had come to us through various means and who experienced having very, very high levels of fulfillment in their marriages. Mm-hmm. And they had all been married for a long time. The average length of time was 31 years. But some of them had been together for 40, 50, one case even over 60 years. And, you know, one of the things that was true for almost all of them mm-hmm. was that their sex life was a very important priority in their relationship. And they both partners were aware of that and were in agreement that that's something that they wanted to not only maintain, but continue to support and even deepen and develop it even more. Even with the couples who had, were in their 70s and 80s, it was particularly important. And what they had acknowledged to us was that although, with their aging bodies changing, they weren't necessarily engaging in the same kinds of sex that they were when they were in their 20s and 30s, but they were very, very involved with physically connecting with each other in various creative ways and in enhancing that level of the relationship. Mm-hmm. So the next book that we wrote after that was called Happily Ever After and 39 Other Myths About Love. And one of the myths that we talked about in that was, and this is a myth, that sex diminished the quality and the level of fulfillment with sex diminishes over time. And the whole sexual, your sexual experience kind of flattens out.
And if you believe that, it will.
It becomes
a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and there's an awful lot of people who do believe that. And what is true is that, sex isn't necessarily red hot all the time. And as you get older, there's a different quality to it than there is, when your testosterone is going through the roof, when you're 21 years old. However, it is not inevitable that the quality of your experience is going to diminish. But like Linda said, if you believe that, that will become your reality because you won't even hold a vision of continuing to experience deeply pleasurable sexual connection because you won't see it as a possibility. And we can't really work towards the fulfillment of a vision that we don't think is possible. So be careful that you don't fall into that trap, because we know of many couples who are even older than we are, who continue to have very, very fulfilling sex lives.
Yeah, so a lot of it is in your belief system. I'm very happy to report that we have a question in the chat box. So I'm going to read the question aloud. How do you go about talking with your spouse about fantasies you want to act out with them? It can be quite scary if you haven't done this before. So I want to thank the person who wrote this question, because I think you're speaking for many people out there. And I want to acknowledge you for having the courage to ask the question. And I want to say that it is scary, and that part of the reason that sex was so hot in the very beginning of the relationship is because we were in discovery. And this is another way that you can heat the relationship up that needs more heat, is to get back to that kind of vibrational field where you're in discovery about each other. And people have been together for a very long time, get a little complacent and say, I know everything about that other person. And you don't, because they change and they may not be revealing all of their inner life to you. And to start speaking about your fantasies with each other can be very enlivening to the partnership. So I would say, tell your partner the truth. Tell them that you've had something on your mind and on your heart for a while, and it's a little scary and it's a little tender, maybe even a little embarrassing and highly vulnerable to talk about it, but that you're willing to stick your neck out and go first, that you're not asking your partner to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself, and you reveal some of your fantasy life to them, whatever that may be. And then wait and ask, what are you experiencing right now that I've revealed that to you? And then you deal with what comes up. You deal with, that sounds too kinky for me. Maybe they're going to say it's not their cup of tea. Hopefully you will be as non-judgmental as you can be. Anything between two consulting adults could be explored. You know, if you do something that could be a little emotionally rough or physically rough, you agree to a safe word, and ask them, would you be willing to risk telling me since I just went?
Yeah, let me just anticipate what some of the people out there might be thinking their partner, how they might respond.
Yeah.
Because I think some partners, you would never get that far with them. Because as soon as you said you want to talk about this subject, that said, look, you know, I don't want to go there. I'm not comfortable talking about that. And, you know, I'm fine with this and I'd rather not. Or some version of that. Let's say that they just didn't want to talk about it. How would you respond to that?
Could you at least tell me why you wouldn't want to talk about it? Because it's something that's important to me. But it's something that's important to me to at least know why you feel so inhibited about this.
I didn't say I felt inhibited. I just said I don't really want to talk about it.
I want to be close to you. I want to be close to you, and I want to know you better. And
are you
I want you to
saying that
know
there's
me
something
better.
wrong with our, you know, sex life? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's
then?
pretty doggone good, and it could be even better. And I really want to know more about your inner life. If you would risk sharing it with me, I'm willing to tell you mine.
What does my inner life have to do with our sex life?
Because I want to be close to you. I want to be closer to you than I am now. Not that we're not close, but I feel like we could be even closer.
Well, if you think that we're close now, why do we need to get into this?
Because I have a desire to be even closer and to add a little variety and spice to our sex life. If you were willing to participate in that with me, because this is not something that I can go do with anybody else. I have an exclusive with you. So it's either we enjoy what we have now, or maybe we could make the edges of the comfort zone a little wider, a little bit more area to play.
Okay.
That would really make me happy. It would be a great gift to me.
All right, so pause. Let's step back from this, and I want to just say a couple of things about this interaction that we just had. I'm curious, I'm not going to be able to find out, but I'm curious what your thoughts and feelings were as you watched our interaction. I know that there are some people out there who watched it and said, man, that's exactly how it's going to go with us, or if I were to bring that up. But what did you notice about the way in which Linda responded to my resistance? Mm-hmm. Because that is key. She didn't get angry. She didn't get defensive. She didn't get pushy. She stayed clear and calm and spoke very personally. She didn't try to get me to do something. She talked about why it was important to her. So I didn't feel like I was being judged or criticized or attacked.
Good.
And even though I wasn't particularly, you know, I would say enthusiastic about accepting her invitation, but she didn't get derailed by my resistance. And that's something that, you know, the first thing I talked about earlier was responsibility, that it's the responsibility of the person who has this desire, a stronger desire. Most relationships, one person is more open and interested and motivated to get into some of the details about your sex life, but it's that person's responsibility to participate in a way that will invite that their partner, not force them, not control them, but invite them to open up to have this conversation. And the way you can do that is by being respectful, by holding your ground in a very open, supportive, vulnerable way, and not being reactive if your partner does resist. I felt my own internal resistance kind of melting
Good.
as we were interacting.
All right. We have another really helpful question, and I'm going to read the question. My husband has erectile dysfunction, and he gets very upset when he can't perform. What kinds of sexual pleasure can you recommend to be fulfilling emotionally and physically? Thank you very much for the question. And not being able to keep an erection, not being able to get an erection is of concern to both members of the couple. Sometimes the man who can't get an erection or keep the erection has so much energy on that, more so than even the woman does, that she can stay engaged in the love making. He's got two hands and a mouth. There are ways to be stimulated. There's lesbians having fantastic sex, and there's no penis or erection anywhere around. And so to be willing to be creative, just don't quit. Don't let the frustration paralyze you. That there are ways in which you can caress, you can be close, you can have loving, tender, hot words exchanged. And fortunately, we live in a time where we're blessed that there are good meds for erectile dysfunction. Let your medical caregivers know about it. And tell them your other medical conditions to see if there are certain drugs that are contraindicated. But a lot of time, erectile dysfunction is coming from anxiety, that people just get into so much worry and fear and anxiety about it, that if you have a more playful attitude towards it, a more allowing attitude, things go up, things come down, that it's all right, and not to make it larger than life, that you two can be very close, you can have a lot of sensual pleasure, and there can be, profound and beautiful lovemaking with a soft on. And don't take my word for it. Find out from your own experience and see how much pleasure and closeness you can have, and use the pharmaceuticals that are available to. Mm-hmm. You want to take this question here, read this one? This one about sex after betrayal with porn.
Okay, what about trying to engage?
Re-engage?
To re-engage.
Yeah.
With sex after betrayal in a relationship after discovering a partner's severe porn addiction. Partner is in recovery from. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's two issues there. There's obviously the betrayal, that's a big one, and porn addiction, and that can be serious too. So first of all, I just want to be clear about what constitutes an addiction. And addiction really, it's not necessarily the frequency, although that's a factor in the porn viewing, but it's the intention, and it's the compulsiveness about needing to get that desire fulfilled through porn. So there's a compulsive aspect to it that makes it very difficult, like in any other addiction, for a person to stop doing it, which it does not at all take that person off the hook. If they're addicted, then that addiction, any addiction, is going to interfere with the relationship. And often an addiction is an attempt to substitute for an underlying desire or need that is not being fulfilled. So there are, pretty significant dangers in a porn addiction. We're not necessarily moralists about, porn is wrong or right, but addictions certainly will not only diminish the trust level and the quality of experience, because they will inevitably, or for the most part, they do involve dishonesty and deception and shame. So those things are going to affect your relationship. And so it has to be acknowledged that there is an addiction, and in this case, the person is getting some help for that. And that's
terrific
really
sign.
Absolutely essential, because it's possible for some people, although it's rare, to be able to recover from a serious addiction without some support. Doesn't necessarily have to be professional support. Could be group support from a self-help group or from a 12-step group. But there has to be an intention to recover from that.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add that no matter what the addiction is, if it's a porn addiction, a sex addiction, an alcohol addiction, a work addiction, a drug addiction, I want to affirm that once the truth comes out and once a person takes responsibility and admits that they have an addiction, recovery after betrayal is possible. Some people think that when there's an affair, once a cheater, always a cheater, get rid of that person, you can't recover. That is not our belief system, and we believe that people can do their work and that you can have a higher trust even before the betrayal if you work at it.
So let's talk a little bit. I'm not sure how much more time we have here, but
5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So let's talk a little bit about what the work is in recovery from betrayal. First of all, I just want to mention that betrayal, we often usually associate it with sexual betrayal, that the person had an affair with somebody or they had a liaison with somebody that was outside the bounds of their relationship. But there are many different forms of betrayal. A betrayal is actually a behavior that in some ways goes against a stated or implicit agreement that you have with another person, that there's a certain understanding that you have, that these are the limits of the understanding of our relationship, and we both commit ourselves to honoring that, and that when somebody goes outside of that, that's experienced as a betrayal by the other person. So the first step in dealing with a betrayal, whether it's sexual betrayal, financial betrayal, whatever, is to acknowledge that, I behaved this way, and I acknowledge that I broke a commitment that I have. And it's much better. There's a much better prognosis for those couples in which the person who did the betraying came forward and acknowledged it before,
rather than getting found out,
to their partner's attention through something other than an acknowledgement, admission from this person. Like if a friend came and told the other person about it, or if this person happened to be looking at their cell phone and noticed certain texts that made reference to a relationship that they hadn't acknowledged to them. So that's betrayals will do great harm, and sometimes irreversibly, to a relationship if they're not dealt with, and the sooner the better, and the more willing you are to take responsibility for it, the better. And the first thing that really is necessary after you go through that stage is to allow the person, your partner, to express what they need to express without trying to justify, explain, rationalize, or excuse your behavior. To let them vent, let them have their feelings, and you just sit there and you listen.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you're not willing to do that, if you interrupt them, if you try to get them to see your side of things before they have finished, you can kiss your relationship goodbye most of the time. Because what they need is they need to be heard. Mm-hmm. They need to feel their outrage. They need to feel their pain, their disappointment. They need to feel it, and they need to know that you're hearing it and you're taking that in.
And if you try to go too fast to apology and forgiveness before you have the opportunity to be with the dark, shadowy, raw feelings, it's not time appropriate. You can do the repair, but you have to do it step by step.
And depending upon the people, and depending upon the circumstances, and depending upon the nature of the betrayal, the recovery from that to repair the damaged trust mm-hmm. could be much longer than you think it should be. You don't know how long it's going to be. Mm-hmm. You don't know how long it's going to take. So, I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about the mechanics of repair for betrayal. But what I do want to close this part of it with is that repair, in almost all cases, is possible. But sometimes it takes a lot on the part of both partners to get through this process, depending upon how extreme the betrayal was.
Yeah, and get some good help.
Yeah.
We have lots more juicy questions, and I wish that we had more time, but we need to wrap up, and maybe we can address the questions at another point. But I do want to invite you to take a look and assess whether you feel like there's enough heat and juice and vitality in your sexual relationship, and start by telling yourself the truth. If you feel that it could go higher, to higher realms, and you want to go for the gold, be willing to talk to your partner about that, to not just settle, and invite them into a collaboration about how to do that, and then be creative about being experimental and find things that will work for both of you. We have a website that is bloomwork.com. If you go to our website, there's a place that you can click and you will become a member of our newsletter. We send out a once a month newsletter that's a booster shot of inspiration about how to keep your relationship in the best possible shape. And you will have the opportunity to download 3 free ebooks. One is on sexuality, one is on conflict management, and the other one is the 10 most important things that we had known when we got married. We didn't learn them till later. It would have saved us a lot of trouble. So I've enjoyed being with you today. www.bloom, B-L-O-O-M, singular, Bloomwork. It's not Bloomworks. That'll take you to a nursery, flowers. Bloomwork.com. And I think you'll like our ebooks. So there's all kinds of free stuff on our site. You can see our Facebook Live videos and our, YouTube videos. And we're wishing you plenty of heat in your relationship. Enjoy.
Bye.